Teachers of Reddit, what's the most interesting thing a child has brought in for show and tell? Someone brought air in a bag from his room. He opened it and tried to get everyone to smell it. He told everyone afterwards it was just a fart and everyone just lost it. This is glorious. It really was. The kid skyrocketed in popularity afterwards and became the class clown. For his flight unit culminating project he made a bottle rocket and accidentally pointed it at our teacher. I had one little guy bring in rocks and fossils to my class. Teacher here. Now, I love that stuff too. So I'd bring in pieces from my collection as well. It started with bits of obsidian, amethyst chunks, local mollusks and shale. And it went back and forth for several weeks. We even traded a few pieces. I'm friends with his parents. And they were cool with it. Then I brought in a big, complete fish fossil from a local river. Complete with sparkling scales. He thought that was cool. Then he brought in a complete fossilized beehive. I was gobsmacked. I didn't even know this was possible. His parents and I contacted the local museum. And that fossil is now on public display. It is the finest of its kind found in British Columbia. And the kid dug it up on his grandparents' farm. Obligatory, not a teacher. But in kindergarten, we had a project that we each had a predetermined day where we had to bring in our most special favorite things. One kid brought in his NES. A couple brought in toys or dolls. On my day, I brought in my dad. We were super poor at the time. And I know he didn't get paid for taking the day off, so I know my parents had to sacrifice to make it happen. I will remember getting to spend the whole school day with my best friend forever. Obligatory. As a kindergartner, I once brought a homing pigeon to show and tell. The class tied a note to its leg and we released the bird. The next day for show and tell, I brought the note. That's awesome. Everyone should carry a homing pigeon on them at all times. Complete with an SOS note. In the event of an emergency. Say you are getting robbed or are in a car accident. You then just need to release the pigeon and help will soon be on the way. This is just common sense. Not a teacher. But my mom is and has wonderful stories. One of my favorites is this kid that forgot to bring something to show and tell. Instead of panicking, he just pretended to hold something about a foot big in his hands and presented his invisible car. I'm talking describing the structure of the car. Where he got it, it was some basic store like Walmart or something. I can't remember. And how he liked to play with it. He even took extra care to carry it back and put it carefully on his desk. Moving it a bit to the side so he could access his coloring sheet. Just to have fun. My mom asked him about it a few days later and he goes, double quote, "Oh that? Yeah, I got bored with it so I gave it away." What a neat way to wrap up his story. Kids are crazy creative. Edit. Hot damn y'all. My most upvoted comment by far, thanks. I'm sorry I didn't reply after posting this. I made the comment and got busy with random stuff. A bit difficult, but we had a pet day at school and most people just brought their cats and dogs. At lunch we did a big show where people with pets walked around in a large circle. I remember hysterically laughing cause this one girl brought her pet fish and was trying to walk with it. We were probably about 6 or 7 at the time, so she was really struggling with the thing and trying to walk without sloshing the water. Props to her though, she loved her fish. A child's trekking stick made out of a human femur. Legit. Despite the legality of using human remains being in question. And some serious side-eye from me all year during conferences. The story of how he acquired it was quite interesting. Apparently, it was a family heirloom and the kid's great-great-grandson dug it up from his backyard in rural Virginia back in the early 1800s and named it. No joke. Double quote. Lemuel. I had a kid in grade 1 bring in his sock. He said it was smelly and used it for training to cope with bad smells. 17 5-year-olds rolled on the floor in hysterics. Best show and tell ever. My son was assigned to bring his favorite book one day. Well, he was absolutely fascinated with the phone book that recently came. Took it to school. Later learned every teacher heard about internet generation kid who loves the phone book. AWW, this is actually so sweet. EBH, the phone book is pretty cool for someone who grew up with the internet as a primary means of communication. It's a look into how things were in the past. Taught at a rural Canadian school last year. Kid in grade 6 brought in pictures of a hunt he went on with his old man. One picture was of this little 4-foot boy holding a severed deer head. Double quote. "Check this shit out," was what he said to his friends as soon as he arrived that morning. Edit. Thought I responded but had HTTY Wi-Fi. To answer the common question. Nah, I didn't let him show the class. I had trembling post-war flashbacks to when I showed them Food Incorporated. And half the class threw up or pretended to. Told the little man no way. Had a student who wanted to bring in a dummy hand grenade. He was somewhere on the spectrum and was super into military history, and he could not understand why he couldn't bring it into school. It had no explosives but was 100% accurate in every other way. To be fair, I had trouble understanding why he couldn't bring it in. I was in JROTC all 4 years of high school, and we had this crazy old military substitute once who brought in all his gear from his military days. He had these hand grenades and was like, "He, the military, doesn't know I have these. Man. Our faces." He then demonstrated that before you throw a hand grenades you push the lever down and pull the pin. You keep the pin and keep your hand on the lever because you can re-engage the pin. Well, you see. Before he re-engaged the pin, he fucking dropped it. Every kid screeched back in their chair and a couple screamed. It was a fake, of course, but he got us good. I'm not a school teacher, but a leader for a program in a church. Double quote. Stuffed animal night. Some little boy brought in a devil plush toy that said, "I love you," in a creepy voice. I worked with the 3-5-year-olds. Out of the 16 there that night, 15 left crying and 1 left laughing. I can tell an interesting story. My youngest sister is adopted from China. We have a cousin, white like the rest of us, that's a model and at this point was in a lot of magazines like Cosmo, Vogue, etc. My sister brought in magazines to show off for show and tell. All the shitty while little 3rd grade girls made fun of her, saying that the girl in the magazines wasn't her cousin because of the white Chinese thing. The next time it was my sister's turn, she brought in our cousin in the flesh with a bigger stack of magazines. Checkmate. Beaches. My gut response is to want to be mad. But I remember when I was in like 3rd or 5th grade and a girl ran out of line to hug a kid in a kindergarten line. When she came back she told us he was her uncle and no one could figure that out cause he was younger. Even I took a moment to wrap my head around it, and I've got a niece the same age as me. They could still be biologically related cousins. But family lines and genealogy are deceptively complicated even before you start throwing in mixed race couples. So I understand 3rd graders being DCKS about it. Still nice to hear they got theirs though XD. When I was in kindergarten we did show and tell by the letters of the alphabet, IDK how others did it. So when we get to W I brought my dad. His name is Wes. I grew up around horses, so when we were on H my dad brought a horse for us to pet. The town I lived in was really small so it wasn't the weirdest thing. My sister's class did show and tell the same way. She got L so she tried to bring in our aunt. Couldn't figure out why because her name starts with V and she's an artist in NY. Nothing L related. Of course everyone tells her this. Then sister gets all mad and is like, "But lesbian starts with L." She ended up taking an LP. I teach online school to 2nd graders. One day during live chat, a little girl brought her dog swaddled in blankets. When it came her time to share, she held the dog up to the camera and said, "This is Sparkles. She is 2 months old and died right before chat started." My student brought her dead dog to chat. There were 11 other kids in the chat room that all saw this. Not a teacher, but I brought in my new puppy in year 2. I was so excited for all my friends to meet her, and my mum, being as amazing as she is, decided to ask the teacher and sort it out so it could happen. She held my dog in her lap while the other children went one by one and petted her. For weeks I was the coolest kid in class and I felt so proud to have such a cool mum and cute puppy. What I didn't know at the time, however, was that one of my friend's mum had just died of cancer. My mum was kind enough to try and cheer this little boy up without singling him out and making him embarrassed. I still live with my mum and dog and I love them both more every day. Edit. The pupper in question, as some have been asking. She's called Jasmine and she's still a very good girl. Pic. http. imgur. comtmu64cm. jpg. Not a teacher, but my cousin brought me in for her show and tell. Item. Once. She was 5 and I was 1. So I don't remember it. But apparently her classmates really liked me. I brought my granny once in grade 1 or 2. She was Scottish with a thick accent and I proudly promised the class that I would sit translate for them if they couldn't understand what she was saying. She talked about that until the day she died. Not a teacher, but I remember a student brought in a sword, which he claimed his grandfather took off of a Japanese airplane that he shot down during the war. I don't think his parents knew he took it. I still can't get around how a little kid was able to sneak what sounds like a katana to kindergarten. It was broken on account of it coming from a plane that was shot down. However, if anything, that probably made it more dangerous. This kid just pulled out an unsheathed half of a sword out of his backpack, wrapped with like a napkin. And the teacher was so fascinated by it as much as we were before realizing, oh yeah, he should not have that here. One of my professors told me that when he was in first grade a kid in his class got his toe cut off in a lawnmower accident. The kid brought in his toe in a jar for show and tell. I'm not a teacher, but when I was in elementary school I brought in my pet squirrel. My dad had a schedule in which he was off work that day, so he brought her to the school for me in her harness and leash. This one guy I know brought in a limited edition ultra-lord action figure. 7 weeks in a row. I teach 2nd grade and this kid, one of my all-time favorite kids and families, brought in a large black trash bag that was tied at the top. I asked him what was in it, but he said he wanted it to be a surprise. When it was time for show and tell he struggled to get the bag to the front of the class. But when he got there he pulled the bag off and it was a taxidermed bear from the shoulders up. Wide eyes, bared teeth, the works. Kid's dad was an avid hunter. He would bring me elk and venison throughout the year. And when I texted him a picture of his super proud kid at show and tell, he was like, I was wondering what happened to Leroy. I texted the picture to his former kindergarten and 1st grade teachers to ask if he had ever brought Leroy before. And they told me no, but asked if I could send the student to redo his show and tell for both of their classes because they thought their students would love it. Edit. Leroy. https. imgur. bmswj wipe. I remembered it with teeth bared. But I guess that's what time does to memories. I was the student. In grade 1 or 2 I brought a skinned rabbit face in for show and tell. My aunt from Newfoundland sent it to me in the mail cause I guess they eat rabbits. I think this was close to Easter, which was most likely the reason she sent it then. Didn't realize how creepy that would have been for my teacher. Not a teacher, but I brought in both of my cats. Our school allowed kids to bring their pets in for show and tell, but most people brought in things like hamsters and mice and other small animals. Brought 2 fully grown cats. Not a teacher, but in 2nd grade, I forgot to bring an item for show and tell. I had a somewhat loose tooth, so I excused myself to the bathroom. Casually ripped out the tooth with my fingers. Walked back and showed it off to the class. And X200B. My mother was called. Not a teacher, but a student. To preface this, my family tends to have macabre humor. Even when I was young. For show and tell one day I brought in a story. The night before, my mom and dad were in the garage building shelves with big rubber mallets. I walked into the room and asked, "What's all that banging?" To which my dad, 10 feet away from my mom, started shaking the mallet at her and said, "Oh, I'm beating your mother." Suddenly the head of the mallet flew across the room and hit her square in the face, breaking her nose. But that's not what my class heard. They heard the story of how my dad was beating my mother with a rubber mallet and broke her nose. This resulted in some fun trips to the school counselor and a visit from CPS. Why did I tell the story to my class? In all the commotion I never got a toy for show and tell, and that's all I had on hand. It was a fun time on all sides. Not a teacher, but my little brother once made a rocket out of tampons glued to a stick and took it to school. The teacher called my mom and told her all about the rocket. He was in first grade, so the rocket was not a school threat, but it was just funny. Also, he once took a bag of grass to school and the school called and asked what his intentions were. He told the teacher that he likes dealing with the weeds with dad. In all reality, he liked helping dad garden and liked mowing the yard with his toy mower next to dad. One of my kindergarten students brought in a legit set of Russian Matryoshka dolls. Every time she opened one and there was another inside, everyone in the room lost their shti. Every time. Goddamn, most hilarious show and tell I can remember, lol. Edit. Someone pointed out the correct word, which is not babushka. Not a teacher, but my favorite memory of show and tell. When I was in kindergarten, the first time we had show and tell, I bought in my favorite stuffed animal. Think one of the late 80s cartoons. It was one of those. Sitting in the classroom circle, I remember looking across and seeing the exact same toy being held by another little girl. We were so excited about it. She became my best friend and still is today. All because of a crazy stuffed animal. I wasn't the teacher in this case, but a guy brought in a slave collar from before the Civil War. This was a history class, and we were discussing the early 1800s. Close bracket. We had all learned about slavery, of course. But seeing a thick iron collar and chain that were meant to be placed around the neck of a human being so they could be sold as property. To this day, it's the only thing I've ever seen that just felt evil. Obligatory. Not a teacher. I brought in my great uncle when I was in kindergarten. He fought in World War II and was an anti-aircraft gunner. He had a shell explode near him and had huge shrapnel scars on his legs that he showed off. I explained about bombs and debris and he told stories about his time with the Canadian Army and lying about his age to go fight. My teacher thought it was pretty morose and that we were a bit young to discuss war, but I think he did a good job of explaining things on a level 5-year-olds could understand. A kid in a couple years lower than me had a dad that was a banker. He brought in some cool play money and even handed some out to kids, including me. When I showed my play money note to my parents, they were shocked to find it was actually $2 100 bills. I'm from the UK. A letter from the school went out to all the parents asking them to bring it back to school. Imagine that kid was in a shitty load of trouble. My old secondary school tutor told us that when she did her training they had a show and tell day and a kid brought in a shark tooth necklace and said they were from real sharks his uncle had killed while away. He passed the necklace around and while talking one of the other kids went, "If these are from a real shark, why do they say made in China on the back?" The other kid, without missing a beat, went, "They were Chinese sharks." Done. My co-worker's story. 5th grade, a girl came with her grandma to school early and asked if she could put a big 2-ball air bowl into the classroom. It was the thick colored plastic with a lid kind. The science teacher saw nothing wrong and let her in. Class starts and the girl keeps going to the laundry basket, large plastic bin with handles they keep to hold lunch boxes. Finally the teacher follows her and is completely startled. After everyone had put their lunch boxes away, the girl had opened the lid of the bowl so her pet snake could breathe and simply let it hang out in the basket. The fun part is that she had lied to her grandma about having permission and the science teacher felt embarrassed for letting her into the classroom early.